G'day everyone, welcome to the Outback Packers podcast, the podcast where two mates from all the way across the world have a yarn talking Packers football and the green and gold. I'm Nick Gregory with my co-host Joe Pearson, as always. Today welcoming on one of my favourite personalities and content creators on Packers Twitter, writer for Wisconsin Sports Heroics, Sam Holman. How are we doing, Sam?
Doing pretty well. It's a little late over here, but I usually stay up a little late. Just watching film or cutting up video or something. So it's not too out of the ordinary for me.
Yeah, awesome. Really, really, I'm really glad to have you on. And yeah, I think we should probably start the show off by addressing what happened with DeMar Hamlin today in the Bengals and Bills game. For those of you who have not seen, he was hit on a tackle with T. Higgins. And of course, from what I read, it was like a heart issue and had to be sent to hospital straight away, and the game was cancelled.
Yeah, from what I heard, it was, I of course everybody in the world was retweeting the video, but the hit was a helmet to right around the heart area of the chest, and he got up like nothing was wrong, and then the next thing you know, he collapsed. And from all reports was that they rushed out there, they got the AED on him real quick, and they were having to perform CPR on him right there on the field. So, I mean, it's a pretty scary situation. I'm kind of miffed in a way if everything's kind of come out. I mean, not everything's going to come out right now because it happened so soon, but some of the things that I was seeing on Twitter, some of the comments people were making on Twitter about, they could have just continued playing the game and, whatever. And then the kind of so far what we're hearing the NFL response, that kind of is bullshit. And this guy possibly could have died right there on the field, and they were saying that the NFL was only going to give him a 5-minute rest warm up period, and then the two teams got together and said no, we're not playing anymore. So they finally postponed and then canceled the rest of the game. But if that's the response to it, that's kind of bullshit because this guy almost died or could have died. He's still in ICU for all I know, and they weren't going to release anything medical on him until tomorrow. And just for that kind of response to happen and seeing the faces of his teammates and the opposing team, there's no way they should have even considered continuing that game.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'll step down from my soapbox. You guys can speak.
Absolutely. I mean, Sam, how do you feel about this?
No, I totally agree with you, Joe. I mean, that I can't imagine being someone or a player who watches that happen to your teammate. And like, I feel like we forget that even across teams, like guys still like have friendships and camaraderie with guys on the other teams. And so even for the Bengals, I can't imagine, going back on the field after that. And there was an update just a few minutes ago. The Bills tweeted out that it was cardiac arrest that he suffered on the field,
Yeah, wow.
and he's still in critical condition. So definitely, thoughts, prayers, whatever you believe, send those his way.
Definitely. And, you also got to send him out to T. Higgins, too, because you got to be thinking he's feeling like complete shit right now because it happened after he hit DeMar. So, I'd hate to be in those shoes. I wouldn't want to be in that situation. So, he's got to be feeling a bit rough about this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, It'll be something to keep an eye on going forward. I mean, I know everybody's kind of upset because, we spent all this money on tickets and everything. But, hey, these are freak accidents, and you just got to roll with the punches on it.
Yeah, definitely.
I think kind of the last thing I want to say before we get to the more lighthearted stuff is that I hope this really leads to more like player safety and actual material changes within like the policies of the player safety and the structure of the NFLPA, because even they don't have to look any further than what happened with Tua this year. And even if he wasn't concussed for some of those games, the fact that he was just kind of put back in those games without full assessment, and even the fact that we're kind of having these conversations about him potentially ending his career so soon into his career with even just concussions, which has been a big issue for a long time. I hope that it does lead to better changes for the guys playing on the field because it's a dangerous sport.
It is.
Mhm.
I think the only thing that they could really do with the DeMar situation is maybe start implementing some kind of flak jacket part to the padding because really there I don't know how you could stop that because the shoulder pads do come down around the heart area so they are protected in a way so I don't know if there's anything they could really do to prevent because this is such a freak accident.
Mm.
I mean, we all know it's a dangerous sport, but more so with like broken legs, broken arms, broken, severely as severe as like broken necks and paralysis. We were talking before recording about like, Ryan Shazier and Johnny Knox and guys like that, where, those kind of freak accidents, but you don't really see the cardiac arrests or those kind of situations. So, I'm not sure what they could do to fix it, but I get what you're saying, Nick. That this
Yeah,
needs to push more to player safety.
yeah,
Yeah, and it
yeah.
feels like the Tua thing, like you said, this was more of a freak accident, but the Tua thing is this kind of a especially
Yeah.
big problem, kind of exposed a big problem within the NFL's player safety regulations.
Did you guys
Mm.
hear how they finally put him into concussion protocols after last week?
I think didn't he self-report?
Well, it was. I don't know if it's
Oh
true or
wow.
not because it's the wonderful Twitter. Believe only maybe a quarter of what you read on there. But something about
Yeah.
Mike McDaniel said that they were in the team meeting on Monday and they were going over some film, and Tua couldn't remember specific things in the second half of the game. And
Oh man.
Oh
McDaniel
wow.
said, okay, well, this doesn't seem right, so we're going to get you checked out. And that's how he ended up in concussion protocol. Now,
Oh.
like I said, I read it on Twitter. I don't know if it's 100% true. You know how it is now that you don't have actual verified accounts anymore.
Mm.
So it, um, yeah, if that's the truth, then I think the Miami medical team and even the what do they call them
The
the
spotter.
yeah need
Yeah.
to they need to really look at those guys because if that's what it takes to put the guy in concussion protocol, there's an issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I felt like I saw people saying, well, it wasn't an obvious concussion. Like, it wasn't like the last one where he kind of got up and stumbled around and stuff, and there were obvious symptoms. But that's kind of like I think that's the purpose of what the independent spotter is supposed to do, right? They're supposed to
Mm-hmm.
see and pay closer attention than what everyone else sees and is kind of looking at. And
Yeah,
the fact that they failed to do that is pretty big indictment on the NFL, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
and it seems to be happening more with Miami and Tua. I mean, yeah, you have your issues around the league, but it just seems to be like every other week thing for Miami, and so I think they really need to take a closer look at that situation down there
Yeah.
and go from there.
Yep.
Because I mean, look at Green Bay's. We always, as Packer fans, we kind of piss and moan about Dr. McKenzie and you know how conservative they are with the medicals, but we don't seem to have those kind of problems. If there's an issue, they're right there. They're looking at him. They're taking care of it. If they don't think he's ready to go, he's sitting. Now, obviously, it doesn't work when your name's Aaron Rodgers, but for everybody else, it's been pretty much if you're hurt, you're out.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think even what happened with Christian Watson halfway through the season, where he was concussed that 1 week and then he came back, and they thought that he didn't actually receive, I think, any head trauma in that game, but just the fact that he was like noticeably shaken up, they just kind of decided to pull him out of the game for his own safety, which is something I think I always appreciate about Green Bay is the way they pay extra care on the medical side of things.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, Nick, since you brought us all down with that stuff, what are we moving to?
So I guess first thing I want to say is Happy New Year, guys. New year, new team. I mean, not to be that guy, but it really looks like it.
Well, now wait a minute here. You're in Australia, so you guys celebrate the New Year before us. So you're
Yes.
technically in the future. Is there anything we need to know that's going to happen before it happens?
Just place a bet on the Packers winning the Super Bowl. That's all I got to say.
Nice.
Actually, it's quite funny because I usually try and like put a few couple like bets here and there on the games, and with work and being so busy during the summer period here in Australia, I kind of stopped like doing that. I don't have much energy, and as soon as I stopped placing the bets, that's kind of when they've gone on this win streak. So I'm like
So
hands
it's
off for
your
the rest of
fault.
the season. I'm just like not touching it. I don't think I won any of the bets I put in them earlier in the season because I was like so high on them. And once I kind of just gave up, hands off, that's when they just started going on the run. So no arguments from me.
That kind of reminds me, Jin, if you're listening, you're safe for this week. It wasn't your fault. We actually won, so you need to keep going to more games. You need to go to Detroit next week.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think because there's so much to talk about with this actual game, I kind of just want to look a little bit into, if the Packers do get into the playoffs. I mean, how much do you guys really believe in this team's ability to, play with the big dogs of the NFC? I think they've shown the ability to go kind of that middle class and, the lower echelon of the NFC and some of the AFC teams. But how do you guys feel about, the Eagles, the 49ers, and potentially if they get to the Super Bowl by some miracle, someone like the Chiefs or the Bills?
I'll let you go ahead, Sam, since you're the guest.
Yeah, no problem. I think that they can hang with a lot of the teams in the NFC just because there's a lot of parity in the NFC more so than in the AFC. I think if they got to the Super Bowl and they're facing the Bills or someone like that, I might be less sure. But I think that the advantage that the Packers have is they have a lot of explosive players, right? We saw Keyshawn Nixon, he can flip the field, he can change the game with a single return. We saw with Christian Watson against the Cowboys, right? He can completely change the game. And then you got despite the kind of the underwhelming performances they put up so far this year, the defense still has a ton of stars, right? Even with Rashawn Gary gone, Kenny Clark can make plays, Jair Alexander can make plays. Those guys are all still there, and I think that it might require a little bit more luck than some of the other top tier teams in the NFC. But I think that they can hang with those contenders.
If they can play like they did against Minnesota, then I think they can make a run all the way through. Because and we'll talk about it more with them when we get into the game review, but they played the first complete game they've had all year. And you could probably even go back to last year for some of it. I mean, this is the first complete game they've played.
Yeah.
So if they can continue, what's the common thing I say on here, Nick? Build, stack successes. If they can take what they did against Minnesota, which as much as we hate to say it, they have been a pretty solid team this year. They've had a horseshoe up their ass, but they've been a pretty solid team this year. So if they can do what they did against Minnesota, the rest, against Detroit, then I think they can make a solid run all the way through. They hung with Philadelphia when they played Philadelphia this year. I know there's a little bit of controversy over the Bills game where the Bills just kind of letting the Packers do this or, letting the Packers do that. But to be honest, they really hung with Buffalo this year. San Francisco is always going to be that team, that kryptonite for the Packers. But they have a really young quarterback that, who knows what he's going to do. He's been decent so far, but can he continue that on into a more higher pressure situations? Once you hit the playoffs, it's a completely different boat than the regular season. So can he, I hate to admit it because the guy's a Cyclone and I'm a Hawkeye. I just, he's been playing well, but I just don't know how he's going to be able to handle the pressures when the playoffs hit. Now, he does have a lot of weapons over there, Christian McCaffrey and all that, but I think that would be the team that I worry about more.
Yeah.
Even if Minnesota, or not Minnesota, even if the Packers played like they played against Minnesota, I would worry a little bit more about San Francisco because of the unknown. But I think they can make a run all the way through. I've been the voice of reason all year on this podcast. I've been the ray of sunshine and the hope and all that with this. So I'm going to say it. I could see it, and really, I hate saying it like this, but it's like a mirror image of 2010. You know, it came down to the last game of the year, and it came down to, well, if this happens and this happens and this happens, then the Packers are going to make the playoffs. And so far everything's been going through. Now all the Packers have to do is their part and beat Detroit, and they're in. And I think once they get in, they're gonna be that pest. They're not gonna go down easy.
Yeah, I think there really is something to be said for like kind of momentum, which I think some of the Matt LaFleur team has kind of been lacking. I think Peter Bukowski brought up a good point on his podcast that they haven't really had to actually like really struggle through kind of like the same adversity they had in this season. Last year there was quite a few injuries and things like that, but we still hadn't lost two in a row until this year happened, and I think the fact that they had to kind of really battle with a lot of things that they thought they were doing good, that they kind of lost the ability to do well, and the kind of regression of a lot of their good players who were supposed to be good. The fact that they're kind of overcoming that, and they kind of figure out more than one way to win, and that they can hang in those games, if not always if not win necessarily against these better teams. I think there is really something to be said about, like you said, that kind of momentum going into the playoffs, not having to kind of switch off from resting your starters and then, now we're in the playoffs, let's go. It's kind of, no, we've been going since like week 16, 15, and all gas, no brake, all the way to the Super Bowl. So I think, to me, it really is, it just depends on if they show up or not. But I think, I don't know about necessarily win. Again, I think the AFC teams are the more scary ones, but either way, they're going to be a really fun team to watch in the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's get there first, though.
Yeah. If they make it,
Let's not look over Detroit. Detroit's been playing pretty
for sure,
solidly. So,
all right. Yeah, well then let's get into this game, guys. I mean, there is so much to talk about with this game. I think there was just a smile plastered on the faces of all Packers fans watching this happen, and my God, what a glorious showing for this team.
I don't know what to say about it, because I think nobody. I was prepared for a win, but I don't think anybody thought that they were going to win like they did.
Yeah.
I mean, it was basically an ass kicking. I wish they wouldn't have pulled the starters. I understand why they did and all that, but I was really hoping that the game would end the way. What was it? It was 41-3. That was the same score as Detroit-Chicago. That would have been like magic if the Packers could have held on and won at 41-3. That would have been my ultimate sign to say, all right, this is really, this is something. So, but I mean, I understand why they pulled them. There was no way Minnesota was going to come back, even with their horseshoe. But we really got to. There's two things that we really got to talk about. Keyshawn Nixon finally did it, and Jair shutting down Justin Jefferson. What did I tell you last week, Nick? What did I tell you with Jin on here? I said if Jair shadows Justin Jefferson, this game's over. And that's pretty much what happened.
I wasn't as confident as you were in his ability to fully shut him down. But I mean, look, the stat line kind of speaks for itself in this case. And a lot of things that even didn't show up in the stat line, you've been watching that game, it was incredible to watch.
It was beautiful. And then when he hit the gritty, that was amazing.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah. So, like, for you, Sam, what's something that you really enjoyed watching this game, or something that you thought was very impressive from this team?
I really thought that the defensive line showed out. I mean, it wasn't against top tier competition. The interior of the line for the Vikings was really beat up. They lost their second string center. They had very bad guard. They have a very bad guard in Ed Ingram, and I think their starting right tackle went out during the game. So it's not super impressive competition, but still, Slayton was out there making play after play. He was everywhere. Kenny obviously had the big strip sack, but he was getting pressure pretty consistently. And then Reed and Wyatt, they had moments as well, and even the outside linebackers, they were getting some pressure, especially once that right tackle went out.
Yeah, yeah. I think just the fact that the whole defense kind of finally supported each other, and like Joe said earlier, it's like the whole team played a complete game. I mean, what was your confidence in Jair to really attack Justin Jefferson one on one going into this game?
I hadn't really thought about it because I just assumed they were going to kind of do some sort of variant of what they did week 1. So I'm glad I was wrong though, and he obviously showed out. I mean, they did give him some safety help, right? They played a lot of like cover 2 when Jefferson was outside, and so there was a little bit of that. But I mean, even when Jair was like just shoving him around, press collisioning him like into the stands, basically, he was able to recover and kind of stay in position. Like he was never beat that I saw, and I haven't gone through all the film quite yet, but I was really impressed. I thought he did an awesome job, and obviously there was that moment, when he got Jefferson, got that incompletion and hit the Grady. That was awesome.
And then made Jefferson almost knock the ref out with his helmet.
Yeah, that was extra petty, right? He like Jair and Jefferson like weren't even in on the play, but Jair made sure to come up and just shove him a little bit, just to push him over the top.
And yeah, I just love that that pick in the second half, and then Justin Jefferson tries to kind of do something, and the entire Packers defense is just laughing in his face. Oh my god, so funny.
Yeah, that was great.
I'm trying to think back. I think there was only one time, to use air quotes, you could say that Jair got beat, but he really didn't get beat because of the scheme, and then that was the one catch that Jefferson had. I think it was they were playing soft zone, and Jair kind of had him in his zone, but then Jefferson, I think it was like I'm having trouble with not a slant, but like a curl. So he kind of went out, and Jair was there to make the tackle, but that was the one catch that he had. So I mean, it was beautiful, and I had to laugh because Jair was in so much in his head that even in the after the game when he was asked about it, Jefferson was like, "Well, that should have been a taunting penalty." Okay, man, yeah, you can sit there and celebrate all damn day long, but the minute Jair does it away from you, you get pissed off, and that should be a taunting penalty. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. And then I have to laugh because Paul Allen was on Twitter and was trying to say, he basically said, well, that's Jefferson's dance. It's like, what the fuck ever, Paul. Shut up. I hate that guy. And I don't I don't like saying hate, but that guy just, if somebody was slapping him, I would probably die happy.
Yeah. I think honestly, I was quite blown away. Like, I think that like even this like that second kind of series in the defense where I think there was like a play where Jefferson motioned either in or out of the slot, and Jair followed him the whole way. And you kind of like noticed early on, I was like really, really actually shocked that they had actively decided to shadow him with Jair because kind of like Sam said, that's not something that the Packers really do. Even if you kind of look back at previous defensive coaches, it's actually quite rare that they really decide to, let's plan the whole game around our best corner, around their best receiver, and with the rest we can kind of like figure out. And kudos to Rasul playing very well, but yeah, I was very stunned that he actually decided to do that. And I think Joe Barry said after the game that he kind of let the guys decide their own assignments, like as they were playing the game. And I think that's I think kind of speaks to the level of energy and kind of aggression going into this game because they played a lot more fast and intense than they had this season.
Makes you wonder how the rest of the season would have looked if he would have let them do that all year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you,
I was shocked too with it. The minute I saw, like you said, where Jefferson was in motion and Jair was following, I'm like, holy shit, Barry's letting him shadow Jefferson. This game is done.
yeah. Do you want to open up this bit about Keyshawn Nixon?
Oh, I could talk all day about Nixon. I've been calling it for the last 3 weeks that he was going to run one for a touchdown, and even with the bad groin, he was still able. But did you see the hole that the friggin' special teams had open for him?
Yeah.
I think my fat ass could even got 30 yards out of it. So I mean, that was amazing. And then Keyshawn's quote of saying, when they asked him what he saw when the hole opened, he goes, "The kicker."
Yeah.
But I mean, it's been I think the last kick return for a touchdown was Randall Cobb's in 2011.
I think someone mentioned that Micah
Yeah.
Hyde had one in like 2014 as well.
I think he had a punt return, but I don't think he had a kick return.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Maybe.
I could be wrong. I know Micah returned a couple of punts, but I don't remember him being on kick returns. But I don't always have the best rememberer. But I mean, Keyshawn's been the best return guy we've had since probably the '90s. I mean, the Desmond Howards, the Glenn Milburns, the Roel Prestons. I don't remember anybody. I've never seen the Packers have like horrible special teams like they have the last 8-10 years. But I just trying to think of all the return guys. I don't remember there being this special of a return guy since probably the Roel Prestons, the Glenn Milburns, the Desmond Howards. So
Yeah.
Tyler Irvin.
I suppose you could throw him in there, but I don't. Even he wasn't even that flashy compared to what Keyshawn's been.
Yeah, I think he was just better than
Yeah.
what they had up to that point in this season. I remember
Right.
didn't they have like negative 15
Something
return
like
yards
that.
at some point? And
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah, and I think it's so telling that I think a guy who didn't even have that position until week 9 or week 8 of the season, and now he leads the NFL in basically every single kick return statistic. And we have it here, total yards 930. Tied for first in touchdowns now this week, and the kick return average is also the first in the league. It's just like I can't believe that he's just come in so late in the season after a horrid situation and just they totally turned it around. Like you could quite easily make the case that next to the Minnesota returner, he is the best returner in the NFL.
Yeah, because I think Kenny Nwangu is ranked second, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another cyclone. Jeez, friggin' cyclones everywhere, man. But you got to think the Raiders are kicking themselves, and all these other teams are kicking themselves for not giving this guy a shot on kick and punt returns, huh? So, and I know he was being hampered by that groin because even there for a bit, Randall Cobb was out there fielding punts, and I think they even had Aaron Jones doing some kick returns late in the game.
I think that was when they were like trying to prepare for an onside kick. So I don't think it was like a real kick return, but yeah.
Yeah, so it's special. I'm that when all three phases are going off and special teams was our worst. I mean, the defense hasn't been. I almost went French there. The defense.
Le défense.
The defense has been kind of an Achilles, but that special teams has been rough. And for him to come out and be this boon and to see all three phases hit like they did, like I said earlier, I really see if the Packers get in, they're going to be hard to take out. It's going to be fun. It really is.
Yeah, and since coming out of the bye, the Packers actually ranked number 1 in special teams DVOA, which I think is just so interesting. And on some of those kick returns, I think the one where Keyshawn scored, everyone's blocked up perfectly, and Dalen Levitt is actually trying to find someone to block. He's just looking around. It's like I can't remember the last time I've seen that.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful.
it's
Very good.
it's crazy having like a competent special teams, and even in a game where they had a blocked punt, the special teams, I would say, I would argue, pretty much showed out, right, with the
Yeah.
two missed field goals for the Vikings, the long field goal for Mason. I mean, the kick return touchdown. Yeah,
I think we
Yeah.
do need to talk about Mason a little bit. That 56-yarder was pretty good, but I have to wonder if this is like his last year, especially if they
it
do
kind
win
of
the Super
feels
Bowl.
like it.
Because I
Yeah.
mean, he put everything into that kick just for it to doink over, and it seemed like before it was always, he that would be like guaranteed he'd hit a 56-yarder. But I love the Silver Fox, but I think it's time to start searching for that replacement.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was kind of on that train that I thought, what was the name of that kicker that we had on the roster last year? The one that
Wilson.
I think that, yeah, I thought that he was actually going to end up being his replacement because, Crosby had that rough year. But yeah, I think this the physical aspect is kind of fading. I think we can all see it. I think he's actually the worst kicker in the NFL by touchback percentage. He really struggles to kick it all the way to the end zone now. It's
yeah,
like, it's quite obvious. Um, I actually really like Ramiz Ahmed. It's quite a shame that he got injured warming up, which is because it's kind of a funny thing. But yeah, I think he's basically broken like all the longevity and like points scored records for this team. So I think there's not really much more for him to chase besides a ring. I think he's one of those guys that just has that kind of clutch gene, which I think is like the biggest thing why you want to keep him. But yeah, physically, I think he's been in the league for a long time now.
yeah. He's definitely kind of got those pelts on the wall where he's just put up a bunch of records, and maybe if they get another Super Bowl, he can kind of ride off into the sunset happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Something I kind of wanted to just highlight here as well is, the whole Zadarius Smith thing, him not shaking Adrian Amos's hand, and just, being Z, we don't know what he's like. The fact that, I highlighted Josh Nyman as someone I wanted to watch last week at the right tackle position, and he went out and Tom went in, and, both tackles only gave up one pressure each against Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith, who played so well this season. And the fact that this Vikings team has a good D line with strong edge rushers, and it didn't really seem like it was a problem for a lot of the game. I mean, how do you guys feel about this O line being back at full health now?
Well, I thought it was pretty telling that I think Matt LaFleur said Josh could have went back into the game at any time. That he just came out for the one play and they checked him over and they said he was ready. He could go back in, but he felt more like leaving Zach Tom in there. So it makes me wonder if maybe that could be a permanent switch. Now I'm not an X's and O guy, and I don't follow the exact science of pressures and all that stuff with Yosh, but it seemed like the line got better after Yosh went out, and which is weird because they were doing pretty good even with Yosh in there. But I wonder if this is a telltale sign that maybe Yosh will be on the way out next year, and Zach Tom will slot into the right tackle position.
Yeah, I could see that,
Yeah, quite easily.
especially if they don't want to. I think they probably have to put a. I think Josh is a restricted free agent,
Yeah,
so they could
yeah, they'd have
put
to
like a.
tender him.
Yeah, they'd have to put a tender on him.
And I mean, I hate saying that because Josh has pretty much done everything the Packers have asked him to.
Yeah,
Hey, we need you to start at left tackle. Okay, he'll start at left tackle. Okay, well, we need you to move to right tackle. Okay, well, I'll move to right tackle. But I think, with the grooming, as you would say, of Caleb Jones to be that freak athlete, and Zach Tom being one of the top 5 offensive linemen that the Packers have, I just don't see how they could sit Tom next year unless he has like a major drop off and pulls a Royce Newman and just becomes a revolving door. Sorry, Nick, I know that's your guy, but
Yeah, I think it's over.
but I think because there's no way they're getting rid of Bach next year. And I know we've talked
No.
at length over this stuff, but there's no way they're getting rid of Bach just because of the money. Then you've got Elton Jenkins, who just re-signed for a big deal. He's going to be your left guard. Josh Myers is going to be your center. John Runyon's earned a spot at right guard, and the only open spot is right tackle. And I think if you had to sit down and say, okay, I've got Josh, I've got Tom, which one do I want to put in there? You're going to pick Tom every time because younger seems to be a little bit better, and the money's going to be different because they're going to have to do some cost saving, and he's under contract for the next 3 years. So I think that if the hard choice is going to be that they're going to have Tom as the right tackle.
Yeah, honestly, I'm just grateful that we're in a position where we have to decide between two good options at tackle, and we just have there aren't any foreseeable holes on the offensive line elsewhere. So it's just.
But that's just been Packers football, man.
Yeah.
They always seem to draft 2 or 3 offensive linemen every year, and at least one of them pans out. I don't remember a year that none of the offensive linemen panned out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, I think they always get at least one now.
Yeah, so and this year they picked 3. Well, at the time that they were drafted, we thought that they picked 3 really great offensive linemen. And the one that they were going to have questions about was Rasheed Walker, and ended up being the one that they had questions about is Sean Ryan. And he was supposed to be he was supposed to be the more ready of all 3 of them.
Yeah.
And taking steroids and can't even crack the starting rotation. That doesn't look good at all, man. I'm sorry, Sean, but that's not good. You need to go get your money back from that roid dealer.
It's that 3rd round pick.
Yeah,
it's the curse, man. It's the curse.
So, I mean, there's a bunch we can talk about with this game. It all depends on how much you guys want to talk about it, because it was basically, I mean, there are some down spots. Like you guys mentioned, the block punt. I think that was what did I read? That was Pat O'Donnell's first block punt since like 2018 or something like that.
Yeah.
There were a couple ticky-tacky injuries. But didn't. I mean, I think Aaron Jones got hurt a little bit later on because you were seeing more of Patrick Taylor. Then there was the Quay Walker hit. Dumb penalty. It didn't really hurt him too much, but that's just some things that the young guys got to kind of clean up. Even though I love the attitude out of it.
I was gonna say, he's obviously got to rein in his emotions a little bit, but man, I love the intensity he plays with. Like if you go and like watch the games back, it's pretty much every week he's jawing with offensive linemen, like, and he doesn't do it like when they give up a 40-yard run or anything,
right,
but just like when he's battling guys in the trenches, he's talking, he's talking crap, and I really like that attitude, even though he's had his ups and downs this year.
And that's what we need. That's something Nick and I have been talking about all year, that we need the attitude. It's been lacking for the last couple of years. I mean, the last time they really had any real flair was the first year that Za'Darius and Preston and those guys were on the team. So, that's why even with Jair and the jawing he's been doing all year, I've loved it. Yeah, it's come in some bad spots, but it just... you got to love the attitude, because that's what this Packers team needs. And we've seen that with the attitude has come some winning situations. So I think they need to keep it up. As much as the cap is going to be a hard thing to work around next year, they probably need to bring in a couple of guys, and hopefully that can help bolster things. But like I said, there's so much that we can say on this game that we'd have to do like 3 hours just to cover everything we wanted to cover. And I don't think Sam wants to sit here that long.
Yeah, it might be a little late for me. Or I guess early, depending on how you look at
it. There is one thing I've been thinking about this all day, and it kind of revolves around the game, but then again it doesn't. Adam Thielen really seems like he might be on the way out of Minnesota. Whether they cut him, they trade him, they whatever. But kind of going into the flow, what I said next year, bringing in with the influx of young guys we have in the wide receiver room, if Minnesota were to happen to cut ties with Adam Thielen, what would your guys' opinion on bringing him in to kind of be in that veteran that could help the young receivers? I mean, obviously, if Rodgers comes back, they're going to try to keep Cobb as just to keep him happy. But to bring that other guy in that's still able to make some plays, he's not what he used to be, but he's still capable, and to be kind of a mentor to the younger guys.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like part of the reason why he's kind of on the way out is that he's cooked, to put it bluntly. And so I don't know that he would really add anything like that, like a Sammy Watkins. Like he'd be kind of like a repeat of Sammy Watkins, I think. Just not a veteran receiver. Maybe he does impart like some veteran wisdom to those young guys that you mentioned. But I feel like if we're gonna have a veteran receiver, I feel like Randall Cobb is probably the better option. I don't know what benefit have it bringing Thielen in would really bring, because I don't think he'll really be able to do much on the field going forward.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of at the same spot. If anything, I kind of view him as the same value as like post Packers Geordie. He's like kind of like guy who's basically like cooked athletically and never really had all that much juice kind of in the first place. But yeah, like someone who's like a bit savvy. I don't know. I wouldn't feel comfortable paying any more than like 10 million a year for him, if that. And I think even someone like, as an example of a player, not someone who would actually want to sign, but someone like a Cole Beasley, even I would find more advantageous. I mean, the thing with this Packers passing game is they still don't really have that kind of like reliable possession guy. Like Alan Lazard can do it on and off. Randall Cobb is still kind of injured here and there and is not necessarily the guy he once was. Christian Watson's a big threat guy. Romeo Dobbs is still developing, but I think they need more like reliable guys who are just solid, not necessarily superstars, but as guys who can kind of keep things moving. Because like the guys who can like get open underneath and kind of work that middle of the field a little bit better. And look, yeah, if you want to come around for cheap, that's fine. But I mean, I'm not like clamoring for him, whatever.
Well, I'm not thinking of him coming in and being, the number one receiver or anything, because I figured next year, looking at depth chart, you're going to have Watson and Dobbs at the top. Yeah, and maybe Cobb slot in as 3, so you're going to be needing a 4th or 5th type guy. And I mean, I suppose they're going to Toure is going to slot in there somewhere. You would hope that Toure can slot in there somewhere, but
For
I
sure.
was just thinking
Yeah.
maybe as like a 4th guy in there just to be that veteran to like I said, he's not what he used to be. So I just they were thinking about bringing in Julio Jones. They were thinking about bringing in all these other guys. That it just makes me wonder if they cut ties with, if Minnesota cuts ties with Thielen, if that would be the type of guy they would bring in to kind of be that 4th or 5th guy to kind of help mentor the younger guys that are at the top of the depth chart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I don't think I'd necessarily be opposed to it. I just wouldn't want to pay a whole lot, like something like Sammy Watkins type money, like
Right, yeah.
2 million or something, 2 or 3 million.
Yeah, I'm not saying pay him the world either, because Lord knows we don't have the Packers have the money to do that kind of thing. So, but it was just a thought I was thinking about earlier, because I know he's been pretty much rode out of the Minnesota the playbook, because they're targeting Jefferson more, they're targeting KJ Osborne
KJ.
more.
Yeah.
They were what's the kid from Michigan State that almost hit 100 yards yesterday?
Jalen Naylor, I think.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're looking to move on from some guys too. So it was a thought that I was having, but
Yeah.
Obviously, it wasn't a
Yeah.
good thought. Thanks a lot, guys.
That's okay. With Sam being the resident X and O's guy as the guest here, I think me and Joe aren't super avid film watchers necessarily during the regular season. There's a few questions I kind of wanted to ask you, Sam, regarding more of the kind of the detailed things that you see as someone who can kind of see a little bit of what goes on behind the scenes. you know, um, with this game being more of a defensive showing and kind of the first time the defense has really kind of set the tone for the game for this team. How do you feel about Joe Barry going forward? I think there's a lot of things early in the season where you kind of highlighted a lot of the good things in his game plans, and the defense kind of went down, and now it's a little bit on the up. I mean, where are you at with Joe Barry as a coach?
Yeah, I'm not really sure right now. I for a while I didn't really didn't think he should return. I thought that they should probably go after someone else. I just didn't feel like the defensive scheme it wasn't really put together well, wasn't really executed well. When guys are still having miscommunications in the secondary in week 12 of your second year, I mean, I feel like that's a little bit more on the teacher than the pupils at that point. But I they have done some interesting stuff these last couple weeks. Just experimenting with like their fronts. I kind of wrote on Twitter, put together some film threads on Twitter. Uh, Against the Rams, they basically played all 4-man fronts. They did some different stuff with that, and then against the Dolphins, they played a bunch of like 5 and 6-man fronts. And then here against the Vikings, they kind of mixed them both together, but they kept adding on, just little tweaks, and it's been interesting to watch. I wouldn't say I'm confident long term in Joe Barry, but I would say that I'm intrigued by the options that he's given the defense these last couple weeks. It feels like they've added some more answers to their arsenal where they can kind of just do more stuff, right? They can man Jair up and double people and play a bit more man and do some different blitzes and front movements and that kind of thing. And so it'll be interesting to watch. I mean, if he goes on like a dominant postseason run, then I'd probably be more open to considering him returning. But yeah, I think we'll have to see. I'm definitely intrigued by what he's been doing. I'm still not sold long term though.
So to kind of bounce off that question with the defense, I this is a guy that's been kind of polarizing all year, and now that Dean Lowry's out, he's going to get more of a role. What have you been seeing with Devontae Wyatt, and why maybe they weren't playing him as much? He's not getting as many snaps. With the film that you've been watching, is there something that you've seen that says, all right, well, I can understand why he's not seeing much of a role, or are you kind of like the rest of us and we're really confused about it?
For the most part, I was kind of confused about it. There were occasional snaps where he's kind of looked like he was a little lost on where he was supposed to line up, like he's trying to figure out where his gap is and that kind of thing. And so I wondered if that played into it a little bit more. But they're just I felt like he wasn't getting enough snaps for us to really see to really evaluate what he was putting on the field. And so it, I was mostly just kind of wondering why they didn't get him out there a little bit more, because even when he's not perfect, like I feel like he's got enough hustle, he's got enough athleticism to add some value to the defense.
And I know he's one of those that it's people are wanting to rush because he was a little bit of an older draft pick compared to what the Packers normally do. So there's like a short learning curve for him. So it kind of boggles me that they weren't able to get him out there a little bit more. Same kind of with Jonathan Ford. I'm surprised we're not seeing him get activated at all to play some, just to eat up some snaps or whatever. But
Yeah.
what I'm not an X's and O's guy for anything. I mean, just take a look earlier. I was having a hard time trying to figure out what the hell route that Justin Jefferson ran. But I mean, just from my untrained eye, it seemed like he had his moments where he's shown that he needed more snaps, but then you would get to the next game and he was still only getting like a handful of snaps. So I just was kind of curious if somebody had saw something in like film or anything to say, okay, yeah, I can kind of see where he's needs to do a little bit more work.
Yeah, it would have been a lot more satisfying and take just have them give him like a full like 30 snaps or 40 snaps a game and then just see, okay, this is why he's not on the field.
Right, yeah.
But they never really did that, and I mean, it's like I've said, I'm still going through the tape a little bit, but seemed to do pretty well in this past game. So hopefully, whatever was keeping him off the field won't crop up again, and
Well, it's
he'll be
been
able to
Dean
keep
Lowry.
contributing.
For some reason, he's a logjam for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, and they do have this thing where they don't really play rookies a whole lot. Like there are a couple exceptions, like Darnell Savage, Quay Walker, year one, but for the most part, they like having their vets out there, right? Even like their rookie receivers, Christian Watson was just running jet sweeps at the beginning of the year for the most part, and they go slow with the rookies.
Yeah, Nick hated that. Nick
Yeah.
is probably Christian Watson's #1 fan right now. I don't know how
Definitely
many
number one
texts
in
I would get.
Australia.
You don't know how many texts I was getting saying, "Did you see that one? See, they're getting. I told you. I told you."
Yeah, I mean they are trying to run the offense through him. Like
Yeah.
against the Dolphins, it like really stuck out that those first couple of red zone trips where they couldn't get everything going or anything going for the most part. They were trying to get the ball to Watson like every single time it felt like, and I approve of that. I really like his talent. I think he can create with underneath routes. He can threaten deep. He can do a lot of different stuff, and so yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, obviously, we saw. I think he only had one catch, but it was like a catch and run where he got a first down. So he's a fun kid. I love watching him.
Yeah. I mean, he was
Yeah,
open for a lot of this game. Not to like keep going on about it, but was the name that because I had that one corner on him for a lot of the game,
Yeah.
and he kind of got tangled with him a few times on like underthrown ball or like whatever like the missed pass interference calls. But yeah, I mean, like Roger said, he's open like quite often, even when he's not the main. He's not even when he's not on the play side of like whatever's going on in the pass. So it's like there's just so much there, and it's so funny where a team that didn't have really a number one receiver going into the season, he's already kind of filling that role, not necessarily like the best receiver on the team, but he's filling that role of what the number one receiver should be doing for the game plan.
Yeah.
future's bright in the wide receiver room. I just wish they
Definitely.
would get Torre more involved. So just to,
Yeah.
because even the little bit that he has been involved, he's been quite the playmaker. So I
Mm-hmm.
look forward to seeing what these three can, Dobbs, Watson, and Torre can do going forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Another thing I kind of wanted to ask you about the defense is who is someone who is kind of like a bit of an underrated gem or like unsung hero for you on this team, because I think everyone knows kind of Jair Alexander and Kenny Clark obviously, but who is someone you think probably deserves a little bit more appreciation from Packers fans?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Justin Hollins.
Yeah.
He's kind of I think he's basically their number 3 outside linebacker behind Preston and King. Well, actually, I'm not sure. He may have moved over Kingsley on the depth chart because Kingsley
Really?
was playing in that fourth quarter when they had the backups in and Hollins wasn't. So I'm not sure where exactly that sits, but he's just coming. They signed him basically off the street or off waivers, and I'll have to look. I'd have to look it up, but I think since he got signed, he might be one of the leaders in sacks. He had a sack this past week where he beat Christian Darrisaw, who's a very good tackle. He's just come in, kind of done his job, and put together some splash plays. And I'm really interested to see what they do with him in the offseason because it feels like they like him and might want to bring him back at least on like a really short term veteran deal.
Interesting. Yeah. And kind of the last question I wanted to ask you here is, if this team does make it into the playoffs and they're getting against these really tough teams, what things do you think this defense can lean on that they do well for this team?
Yeah, I think that probably they would want to lean into the strengths of their stars, right? Having Jair lock down number one receivers, putting Kenny Clark at trying to get him at three technique and in those positions where he can affect the game a little bit more. It's harder with Rashawn Gary out. The pass rush has struggled, not always. They've put together some nice games, but it's been harder to get consistent pass rush without him in there. And so I think that get their stars in position to make plays, and then I think do some interesting stuff with their front five, front seven, however they line up. Blitz Quay Walker a little bit off the edge, to get some movement on the line to help your linemen make plays against the run. Just gotta mess around with stuff. And I mean the other obvious stuff. Just don't miscommunicate and give up big plays in the secondary.
It's asking a lot, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I've kind of gone over everything I want to go over with this game. If you guys are happy to move on to the Lions game.
Yeah,
We
I'm
might
good
as
with that.
well. Might as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So last game of the season, I mean, it comes so quickly. It feels like just the other day I was celebrating the Packers getting a top 10 draft pick, and here we are now, staring down the playoffs. Um, this game's kind of like win and we're in. We're controlling our own destiny. But this is like a good Lions team. I mean, this is a really good Lions team. I think second half of the season they've probably been like a top 5 team, like, and not even like as a joke. They're one of the best offenses in the NFL and have been all season. They're 5th in points per game. It's a team that is just like super super gritty, and they fight and they claw their way into these games. It's just like kind of fun to watch as a bystander. But how do you guys feel as the team that's going into the game against the Lions again to finish the season?
I'm feeling pretty decent. I mean, I think that, like you said, their offense is probably the side of the ball you have to worry about, because they've shown almost throughout the season that they can put up 30 points,
Yeah.
against almost any opponent. They've got a great run game, great offensive line, bunch of great running backs. Obviously Jamal Williams, but then DeAndre Swift, and they have some other guys that can contribute. Um, I do think though that the defense is vulnerable, and I think that I saw in the notes that we were going to touch on this, but the offense may not be as good outside the dome setting that they normally have in their home games. So
Yeah.
I'm feeling pretty decent about it, especially with it being at Lambeau.
Yeah, that right there is the key. Being at Lambeau, being outdoors, the and it works both ways too. Both kickers are probably going to struggle because of the weather. It's Green Bay and now it's January. I don't know what the early forecast is supposed to be for the next week, but it's a Sunday night game. They did release that today that it will be Sunday night, prime time, pressure's on, and I, this is one of those times that I wish I could just make the drive up there and watch and be in the stands and just breathe in the atmosphere, because this is going to be one hell of a game.
Yeah.
Uh, there's one thing that I'm kind of rooting for on the Lions side, and it's probably going to happen one way or the other. But Jamal Williams is 6 yards away from having 1,000-yard season, and it
Nice.
just and this would be his first 1,000-yard season of his career.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would just be fitting for him to get it at Lambeau. And
Yeah, totally.
so I kind of, and it's going to happen. There's no way, unless he gets injured or something, that the Packers are going to hold him to under 6 yards. So it just, I kind of look forward to that. But it, Dan Campbell's done a hell of a job with this team. It's not the same
Yeah.
bottom feeder Lions that we've been used to for years. He's really changed that culture up there. So, I'm still not sold on Goff, even though he's been playing pretty well. Amon-Ra St. Brown is pretty lights out. Who would have thought the Lions would have such success after trading, their top tight end and TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah.
So it, and they've got a nice line going on. I really expect them to try that pass to Penny Sewell again at some point. I don't
Would be so
I
on
don't think
brand.
I don't think anybody really expected him to do it the first time, and I really don't think anybody's going to expect him to do it a second time. So, being that nobody would expect it, it's probably going to happen. And knowing the Packers defense, it'll be like a 50-yard touchdown run for Penny Sewell. So, I just, like Sam said, I'm not really sold on their defense so much at Lambeau. I mean, obviously they had a hell of a defensive performance against the Packers in Detroit this year, so anything's possible. But I think if the Packers continued to do what they did with the Vikings, continuing to feed Aaron Jones, continuing to feed AJ Dillon, hit some of the underneath stuff, maybe try to blow the top off with Christian Watson once in a while. I
Yeah.
think they do need to maybe do a little bit more of the specialty plays, maybe a couple of end arounds to somebody. I know the Packers aren't really known for their fakes at the moment, but maybe a couple of flickers. Definitely got to hit the play action there. You know, to quote Waterboy, it's the last game of the year. Don't hold anything back now. Just so you're playing for your season life, so pull out all the
Yeah.
stops. Let Matt LaFleur finally do the no fucking no break, all fucking gas, or all fucking gas, no breaks, whatever the quote is. uh it's about time that happens, because even though there is a possibility the Lions won't be in the playoffs, even if they win, there's a playoff situation that if if the Seahawks win, then the Lions are out of it.
Yeah.
Even if they win, I still don't see that stopping them from playing the Packers hard, because
Absolutely not.
what
Yeah.
better way to put that dagger in the Packers' back than to knock them out of the playoffs?
Yeah.
So it's going to be a tough game. I imagine there's going to be a lot of chirping going on both sides, and like I said, if I could be, I'd be up there Sunday night at the game, because it would just be, I don't know, it, it would be like the Super Bowl. I mean, really, it would be like the Super Bowl, just that atmosphere. So,
Yeah.
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 So it's basically
Um,
already the playoffs for Green Bay.
pretty
well,
much.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's been playoffs for the past like 4 weeks, really. Since the bye, this has been the Packers playoffs. I mean, every week is their last chance. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's just so interesting because just the his kind of history between this team and the kind of like somewhat incestuous relationship between these NFC North teams and these like players that just go backwards and forwards. I think to me, kind of the key of this game is where the Lions are strongest is in the trenches, and they've gotten so lucky with these rookie edge rushers. And, the guy they drafted second overall probably isn't even the best one so far this season, right? Guys like James Houston is like a legit edge defender as a rookie, and everyone knows about the O line. Like I said, Penny Sewell and Taylor Decker, who I think should be playing this week. It's very, very interesting and a good test for, I think, I think the Vikings O line was somewhere where we could have taken advantage of them and kind of did, obviously with injuries, but this Lions O line is legit, and it's going to be a little bit harder to kind of smoke and mirrors your way through it with like things like simulated pressures, stunts and twists, kind of like you said, the way they manipulate the front on defense. So really, really kind of interesting and a good indicator of how they can kind of play against these teams like the Eagles or the 49ers going into the playoffs with better trench play. I'm just really curious to see it, and kind of like you guys have already said, I think, in my opinion, if the Seahawks win and the Lions are out of it, I think makes it even worse for the Packers, because there's nothing for them to lose at all, so they care. I think it's kind of a game where it's like fourth downs. It's going to be 4-down football, And, the Lions always pull out these bullshit trick plays against us. There was that one, that flea flicker with Matthew Stafford like 2 or 3 years ago. It was like an 80-yard play in the first drive. And they just love to just fuck with the Packers. And it's just, I think it's going to be such an entertaining game.
Yeah.
That Aiden Hutchinson's a hell of a player, isn't he? Did you guys see that interception that he made where he's like standing by the sidelines, and
Yeah.
I don't know what they were, they were thinking. Who were they playing? They were playing the Bears, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what they were thinking uh, that he was like the 12th man on the field, so they were going to get like a free play or something.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. He's something special. But yeah, I think you keep Rodgers clean. You get to Goff early, and I think the Packers will take it. I'm not giving up on them now. I've been with them all year long. I ain't giving up now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, do you guys want to get into kind of our guys for the game? We do this every single week. We kind of pick a guy that we think is just going to mean a lot to the success of this game. If you want to start, Joe, who's your guy for this week?
TJ Slayton, he really stepped up against Minnesota. Like Sam kind of said earlier, though, Minnesota was down a lot of their offensive line. So it'll be interesting to see what TJ can come out and do, to see if maybe he was up against some, inferior opponents, or if he's actually taken that step to be that dominant nose that the Packers are kind of looking for, to allow Kenny to play on the outside a little bit more. So I kind of look forward to seeing that, and that's going to be the key. The guy that's going to be plugging up the middle to stop that uh, running offense that the Lions seem to have, and open up the lanes to let the pass rush in to get to Goff. And like I said, that's going to be the key. Get to Goff early, and hit him a few times and rattle him. So my guy is going to be TJ Slayton this week.
Yeah. Sam, who's your guy?
Yeah, I mean, he's not exactly an unknown guy, but I'm going to go with Aaron Rodgers because
Yeah.
that, I think, was the difference in the last Lions game. Like, from what I remember, the offense was able to move the ball pretty well down the field, but what really killed them was when they got into the red zone. Rodgers just had these wacky moments, and he was kind of in a stretch where he was playing really, to be blunt, he was playing really badly. But I think that if he can execute better this time, and I mean, obviously he's been there before. He's done this kind of thing multiple times, where the season's kind of on the line. If he can execute better and kind of get the ball to where it needs to go when it counts, I think that they can win this game. And I just want to say that the crazy thing about this Packers team is they're kind of getting hot, but Aaron Rodgers still isn't playing particular, like he's not on fire like he was at the end of that like 2016 season, the
Sure.
relax stretch. If he can like get hot as well, I mean that could really make this Packers team dangerous.
Yeah, who would have thought the Packers would win and Aaron Rodgers would throw for 159 yards?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of going off of that is who my guy is, kind of Romeo Dobbs. I think it's kind of since we've seen that surgence of Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs has been sidelined a bit with injuries and things like that. I think as you guys just said, Aaron Rodgers has been playing all that well still this season, and I think this team, because they are so strong in the trenches and they have such great line play, I think it's going to be much harder to run on this defense than it was the Minnesota defense. And so, I want to see more of that kind of consistent movement, bypassing the ball. And I think Romeo Dobbs has an excellent chance to kind of be that really reliable guy. Look in this Viking game, Jefferson was covered the entire game, so they used Hawkinson as the outlet, right? So I think in this game where Watson is probably going to be the main focus for this defense, now that he's going to be in the game plan and through practice the entire week. I think Romeo Dobbs has a perfect chance to kind of showcase his ability to just be that reliable, consistent guy and just keep the chains moving and give us a glimpse of what this passing offense could be going into the playoffs if they make it in.
Yeah.
I love Dobbs. He's up on the Packer wall now. I got my signed picture frames up on the wall, and he just made it up this past week. So,
oh, nice.
my guy.
Awesome.
Yeah,
nice. Yeah. Well, do you want to get into your over-unders here, Joe, for this week?
Oh, I suppose. I really kind of struggled with some of them because like I said, this game is going to be one where you pull out all the stops, so it was really hard to come up with stuff to. I don't have any fun ones this week. Let's just put it that way. Let's go. I'm going to kind of combine these two, so it's kind of cheating. Well, no, I better not combine the two because it wouldn't make sense if I did. So we'll just go 250.5 yards for Jared Goff passing. Over, under.
I'm going to go under.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go under as well, just with the cold weather and, him kind of being a dome quarterback, at least with the Lions. I think that he'll struggle a little bit more.
Part of me wants to say the over because I think the Packers are going to really jam up that offensive front to stop the run. So it's going to open up a little bit more of the passing lanes for Goff to do something. But the other part of me thinks that the Packers are going to come out like they did against the Vikings and just shut everything down. So I think I'm going to go the under, but I'm going to say it's just barely under. I think he's going to hit about the 240 range because I think he's still going to get some opportunities to throw, but the Packers are going to keep him out of the end zone.
Yeah.
Let's go with this one because this one will be kind of the interesting one. Over under a half an interception for Jair Alexander.
This is hard. I think I'm going to go under just because Jared Goff has been playing quite well, and I'm actually I've been a bit of a Goff fan this season.
Yeah, I think I will go over. I think that what could happen is they get out to a little bit of a lead, and the Lions have to throw the ball more, and Goff, like I said, he's just not as comfortable in that cold weather, in that open air stadium, and he throws one up, and Jair gets one.
I'm going to go over as well. I think what they'll do, and this is how I think it's going to go down, I think they're going to try sending Jamison Williams out on like a deep route, and Goff's going to loft it up there, and it's going to get cut short by the wind, and Jair's going to be able to undercut the route and make the pick. So I'm going to go over on that. I'm hoping it's more than one, but I'll settle for one.
Yeah, he's honestly had a great season, at least statistically this year. I think he's got his most ever interceptions in a season.
I was just going to say he's at 5 interceptions, and I think that's a career high for him. So let's make it 6 this weekend.
Yes.
The last one I'll do is I'm kind of torn between these two. Let's go 90.5 return yards for Keyshawn Nixon.
I'm gonna say over, but cumulatively. Like I don't think he necessarily breaks like a big one, but I think he has like a solid day returning, and it kind of helps us out.
Yeah, I would go over too. I mean, I think that I don't know how many yards he gets like per game, but I feel like it's quite a bit. He usually breaks one off that like goes up to the 40 or 50 almost every game these past couple of weeks.
He usually gets one decent one at the very least.
I could be completely wrong. I mean, this is something you'd have to look up stat-wise, but I want to say he's probably averaging 90 yards a game.
Yeah.
Just with the way he's been returning stuff.
I think his average is just over 100, I think, just because that last game's inflated it. So, and per game, average is like just over, I think it's 115 or something like that.
Yeah, so I'm going to go over 2, and I'm going to say he's going to break one again.
Nice.
I think he
I hope
loved
so.
the last one, and he's going to make sure he gets in there again this next game. So
Yeah, and we'll see. I think they kept him pretty much off the defensive off
Yeah.
the field on defense. So maybe fresher legs, he'll be able to get a little farther on some of those.
you could
Yeah.
definitely tell he wasn't putting in full speed there towards the end of the return. He just, I mean, he's going faster than I'll ever go in my life, but you could tell that he was kind of pulling up a little bit just so he wasn't putting full
Yeah.
pressure on it. So maybe with a light practice this week, and like you said, with the little bit he played against Minnesota, he'll be rested enough and he'll put on a show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think because I know Daniel Savage is kind of like back starting again this game. I didn't actually really notice. Was he in the slot again, or was he kind of back as a safety, or maybe a
I think
mix?
he was mostly in the slot, and then Ford and Amos were up high.
Yeah, I do remember
Yeah.
them mentioning something about him being in the slot more. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is funny because like Nixon in his limited time in the slot was a good player. He had a couple like nice plays, a couple nice PBUs and things like that. I think it would just be so funny. He kind of like mentioned like getting a spot on the offense just for a couple of plays. I think it would be so funny for him to kind of do what Tyler Irvin did and just do a few fun things here and there.
hey,
Yeah.
that could be one of the end arounds. I'd be all for it.
Yeah.
He's got a running back number, so it'll work.
There you go. There's one thing I want to bring up, and I'm going to go on a rant with this, and
Oh no.
it's kind of been driving me nuts lately. And I know we're going towards the end of the show and all that, but can somebody explain to me what the hell happened to the Lambeau Leap? It used to be before that when the Packers were up, if they'd score a touchdown, you'd see the leap. I only remember Keyshawn Nixon doing the one leap after the kickoff return. The rest of the time, nobody did anything. And it seems like the rest, it's been like that the last few years where they haven't been leaping as much as they used to.
Yeah, I don't know if that's because they haven't been doing it or the cameras just haven't been showing it.
Yeah,
Well,
I
I
think a
mean,
lot of the
even
time
like
the camera doesn't show it very well.
well, I mean, even there's been sometimes like, was it Tunyon that scored the touchdown? And he
Yeah.
went towards it like he was gonna do the leap, and then he just stopped and they went back and started celebrating. And it's like, okay, so I mean, I can't bitch too much because I'm not the guy, I'm not the one having to do the jump, and it is a pretty damn high jump, but it seems like for a team that celebrates the Lambeau leap, we're not seeing it as often as we used to.
I do wonder if it's kind of the older players don't do it as much, like Tunyon, and I mean Rogers obviously like even when he runs it in, he doesn't do it a whole lot.
I don't think we'd ever get him back if he did the leap.
Yeah, that's true. But I kind of feel like maybe it's more of a younger player thing, like when they get like Nixon with his first career touchdown, that kind of thing. That might be more common. I don't know though. It's kind of interesting.
It is, and like I said, I mean, you guys could be right that the cameras just aren't showing it as much as they used to, but it just seems like you're not seeing it like you know, like it used to be. So
Yeah.
I know it's never been one of the celebrations that they used to flag when it was when they would flag for excessive celebrations. So I, being that that's one of the acceptable touchdown celebrations, you would think you would see it a lot more when the Packers are doing good. I understand it when the Packers are down, you don't celebrate like that when you're down by 20 points or whatever, but
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just my complaint.
Yeah, I think one of the things I think as well is because the end zone celebration is like such more of like a bigger deal now. Like we saw just this past game the orchestration thing from AJ Dillon was pretty hilarious. I think maybe it's because they're just too excited to do those like big team dumb celebrations than the Lambeau leap. Who knows? I mean, yeah, I mean it's a classic though. I would like to see it more in the playoffs.
Yeah. Well, I guess do they do Lambeau leaps on the road usually?
No.
Yeah, because we'll be on the road the whole way.
I just forgot. I forgot we were doing home games. Well,
That
yeah,
would
hopefully
be
we get
freaking
this game,
hilarious, though, to do it at Minnesota or something
Yeah,
like
I
that.
feel like we have
Oh,
occasionally done it, maybe into like pockets of Packers fans, but I don't
yeah.
know. Might be imagining that.
Yeah. Sorry, total brain fart there. Yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah. So, is there anything else you guys want to talk about here before we finish up?
No, I just want to say that thank you, Sam, for coming on. It was really great to talk to you. We appreciate you taking the time. You're kind of like me. You're over here, and it's early in the morning for us. But so thank you for taking your time out to spend it to talking with us and dealing with us. I'm glad I didn't have to translate too much for you tonight.
Yeah, no problem. It was a lot of fun to do this. It's been a little bit since I was on someone else's podcast. I kind of do my own thing for the most part, so it is fun to be on here and chat with you guys for a bit.
Yeah,
you're welcome back at any time. Just hit us up whenever you want, and with the season coming towards the end, we'll be moving into some draft stuff. So if that's what you're kind of into, we'd be glad to have you back.
Yeah, no problem.
Absolutely. And is there anything that you're kind of working on personally that you kind of want to just like talk about quickly before we finish up?
Not specifically. I mean, kind of every week I do some film stuff on usually on Twitter. Sometimes I write about it. I am working, kind of just starting work. Writing up the defensive line for the draft, the Cheesehead TV draft guide this year. So just kind of
Awesome.
starting work on that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, yeah, I think that's absolutely going to be a must read going into the off season and the draft season. So, yeah, thanks again for coming on. And yeah, like Joe said, welcome to come on anytime.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
So that's all for today, guys. As always, you can find us on Twitter at Sam_D Holman, myself at Nicholas GRGR. You can find Joe at Iowa_Joe86, and the podcast at Outback_Packers. Until next time, see you later.